Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 5th, 2021 State Board of Education meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all board members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. Remember, you can follow the North Carolina State Board of Education on Twitter at EDStateboard_NC. I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Committee meetings are typically held on Wednesday prior to the official meeting day. Now, remind our on-site visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting and see all of our materials online. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. And I recall from yesterday's meeting, Ms. Kamnitz has recused herself from BizOp 2. This time I call on Mr. Wendell Hall to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Hall.
Good morning, sir. May we all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. We now come to our special recognitions, the time on our agenda when we recognize significant awards, proclamations, resolutions, and those who have made a difference in the lives of our public school students that we serve each day. I'd like this time to recognize Dr. Rachel McBroom for our first recognition of the day. Dr. McBroom.
Good morning, Chair Davis, Superintendent Truitt, and members of the board. I'm Rachel McBroom, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Academic Officer for NC Virtual. And moments like this are some of the best parts of my job when we can recognize excellence in teaching. Now, I know I'm just a little bit biased, but at NC Virtual, we hire the best of the best, and we exist to extend their reach across this great state so that every student has access to an excellent teacher. And so this morning, as I come to you and I want to introduce to you our 2021 Teacher of the Year, I want to just share a few things about her and what her colleagues say about her as well. Joy teaches in our blended math program. That is a program that serves our occupational course of study students. She partners with face-to-face EC teachers at the schools, and the two of them together meet the needs of these students through an online platform. She also has the privilege of serving as one of our instructional leaders, which is a teacher leader role at NC Virtual, meaning that she coaches and supports teachers on the math team at NC Virtual as well. In advance of this morning, I asked some of her colleagues to share some thoughts about her, and I'll just share a few, but I will tell you as I read them, what came to the top is her ability to perceive and notice the needs of others and meet them before they ever ask for them, and also her servant leadership. Her face-to-face partner teachers say that Joy is extremely dedicated to helping students meet their needs. She goes above and beyond in creating alternative interventions and assessments to meet a student's learning needs. Her colleagues at NC Virtual say whether she is working with a student, a partner teacher, or a colleague, Joy is a true example of servant leadership. She is always willing to go the extra mile and puts her own needs aside for the benefit of making someone else's world better. And with that, I would like to introduce you to the 2021 NC Virtual Teacher of the Year, Ms. Joy Crosby.
Hello. Thank you to the board and Superintendent Truitt for the recognition of the hard work of all NC Virtual teachers. I am Joy Crosby, and I'm honored to serve as NC Virtual Teacher of the Year. Prior to my work with NC Virtual, I served students in Wake County at Millbrook High School under the direction of Ms. Dana King. I served in a variety of roles, from classroom teacher, one of my former students is actually here today, to leader to a program coordinator. As part of my work at Millbrook High School, I worked extensively with Dr. Sarah McManus and Dr. Carmela Fair on the NC Falcon Formative Assessment Project and its implementation statewide. In the fall of 2012, I decided to leave the physical building and begin my journey with NC Virtual. My work with NC Falcon and the Department of Education was immediately put into action with a blended learning program to create courses with continuous formative assessment to grow students within the occupational course of study. And today, as the Teacher of the Year, I am fortunate to represent the 800 plus teachers who work day in and day out to ensure that every child in the state has access to high quality courses that meet their needs and ensure success. The past 18 months has shown us all what creates impactful education and what does not. We have learned that the physical location of the classroom is not nearly as important as the qualified, caring teacher leading daily instruction. We have seen the importance of strong, dedicated, unique resources, tools, infrastructure, people, leadership, and relationships working together to successfully reach students in every corner of the state. The online platform can pair highly engaged teachers from any community to support the learning of all students, regardless of zip code, income, race, or gender. Online learning has the opportunity to mitigate or even erase obstacles for students that reside in communities with limited funding and support. An example of this approach and its success is seen in both Bladen and Washington counties. These counties successfully partnered with NC Virtual to pair high-quality master teachers with teachers in their school buildings. Students received instruction from both the online teacher and face-to-face teacher to support their learning. In this setting, the face-to-face teacher was supported by the online teacher. Their teaching capacity increased with time to focus on intervention and coaching strategies to ensure growth as measured on the NC end of course exam. In my personal work with Washington, I learned as much from my beginning teacher as he learned from me. Our students showed tremendous growth, and this year my teacher was named the Washington County Teacher of the Year. This model of growing students in school communities shows the power of reaching every corner of the state through NC Virtual. Another reason NC Virtual is so very special is the focus each day on building relationships with schools, partner educators, and students. The amazing leadership team of Dr. Colbert, Dr. McBroom, and Dr. Cooper challenge me daily to focus on what is needed to grow my students and ensure a positive outcome for school communities. This laser focus on students and their needs allows bandwidth to innovate, meet students where they are, and guide them to success. Virtual education has the potential to provide access for all and expand the learning opportunities for underserved students in this state. This ensures that all students have access to rigorous online learning and will help reduce the achievement gap we see in the state. It is vital for NC Virtual to continue to develop and maintain strong connections and deep understandings of the diverse communities across the state. By opening these doors, NC Virtual is growing the next generation of mathematicians, scientists, and linguists that will shape our nation and world. I thank you again to the board and Superintendent Truitt for the staff and support of NC Virtual as we remove the barrier of location to allow all students to reach their full potential.
Ms. Crosby, we're delighted. My colleagues and advisors will come forward. We'll make a picture with Ms. Crosby. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Let me get the front row come up a little bit more. Maybe we should switch. So we have. So in the back, yep. So nice and high. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2. Yay, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Oh, boy. Well, congratulations, Ms. Crosby. Thank you for what you're doing for our students and how well you represent our fine teachers in the North Carolina Virtual School. Over the last 10 years, this board and this department and public school students and leaders across the state have been blessed to have been served by Miss Tiffany Lucas. Her sound judgment and professional skill and compassion for our students has enabled her to serve the children and those of us adults with excellence. She diligently pursues what's right, keeping the student's needs and interests in the center of her work while providing clear judgment, accurate advice, and consistent legal counsel. We're really blessed to have had the service of Ms. Lucas over these past 10 years. She's now taking on an amazing opportunity with the Attorney General's office. So we don't consider that she's necessarily leaving us, just perhaps changing roles on the same team. So at this time, I'd like to call on my colleague, Dr. Oxendine, to read a resolution in honor of our good friend, Ms. Lucas.
Thank you, Chair Davis. And before I begin reading, I want to say that I am truly honored and feel very privileged to be able to have the opportunity to read the resolution. And Tiffany has always been beside me in small committee meetings, keeping me straight, my mind straight, my thinking straight. So everything I'm about to read is entirely true. So I will begin. The North Carolina State Board of Education resolution honoring Tiffany Y. Lucas for outstanding service to the North Carolina State Board of Education, May 2011 through July 2021. Whereas the North Carolina State Board of Education takes pride in the extraordinary qualities and dedication of the citizens who serve public education through service to North Carolina State Board of Education, and whereas Ms. Tiffany Lucas has reflected these qualities in an exceptional manner during her service to the board and the Department of Public Instruction as Assistant Attorney General and Special Deputy Attorney General on behalf of the NC Attorney General's Office. And whereas Ms. Lucas's unquestionable belief in the North Carolina constitutional promise that the people have the right to the privilege of education, and it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right, and that education is what safeguards democracy. And whereas the board understands that Ms. Lucas's gift of embracing difficult, laborious tasks, complex issues, and situations calmly resulted in her having the ability to steer the legal boat smoothly over choppy waters and resulted in her having a reassuring effect on those she led and the public she was responsible to. And whereas Ms. Lucas's understanding that all children are precious allowed her to advocate fiercely in and out of the courtroom to support and uphold the board's constitutional authority, even through challenging and contentious times. And whereas Ms. Lucas is a mother who pours as much love and attention into parenting as one could ask, all while seamlessly juggling work and other commitments. And whereas Ms. Lucas always conducted herself as the consummate professional as a leader and team member while maintaining a calm and reasoned voice with wise counsel on issues of great importance in public education and on the future of public school children. And whereas Ms. Lucas exercises legal prowess, plus possesses the sharp and determined legal mind that cuts through issues with clarity and purpose, yet with true caring for the impact of outcomes and consequences. And whereas she is the kind and dependable friend who judges not and offers comfort and support to those who seek her for that compassionate listening ear. And whereas Ms. Lucas effortlessly managed home and work responsibilities as a supportive military wife who has championed her husband's rising military career over the years, never once showing her concerns and fears to coworkers over some of his deployments, but keeping a vigilant heart always for his safe return. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the North Carolina State Board of Education expresses its heartfelt appreciation to Ms. Lucas for her tireless and unselfish service and dedication, and resolved that the board wishes the very best to Tiffany Lucas and her family as she turns her attention to other professional opportunities, continuing her dedicated service to the state of North Carolina. And resolve that Ms. Lucas is the humble professional who never once boasts of her Harvard Law degree and who defends to the death all things Carolina and meticulously dresses in her good luck heels, outfits in a show of staunch support for each and every Carolina basketball game, and resolve that the board expresses its highest praise for her service to the Department of Public Instruction, the State Board of Education, and the state of North Carolina, and its approximate 1.5 million public school children and 100,000 plus educators for some 10 years. And resolve that the board, influenced by Ms. Lucas' insight, grace, intellect, generosity of spirit, and unrelenting passion for education, directs the Secretary of the State Board of Education to enter a copy of this resolution into the official minutes of the State Board of Education, and that an appropriate copy be presented to Tiffany Y. Lucas, who served the board and the North Carolina State Department of Public Instruction with distinction as a dependable, reliable, ultimate professional. Signed by Eric C. Davis, Chairperson, North Carolina State Board of Education, Catherine Truitt, Superintendent, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, August 5th, 2021.
Thank you. Would you join me in congratulating Ms. Lucas?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do not know what to say after all of those very kind and generous words, except to say thank you. It has been my great pleasure and honor to have worked alongside with you. Thank you for the opportunity, for allowing me to be a small part of the important work that each of you, that all of you do every day here at the State Board and at the department and out in the field. Thank you so much. I so appreciate this recognition and this honor. Thank you for my special fan club, Laura Crumpler, who were with me from day one. I appreciate the opportunity and all of the information and compassion that they shared with me in starting this position 10 years ago. Again, it has been the greatest honor of my professional career to have worked alongside you. And I already miss you all, but as Chairman Davis pointed out, I'm really not that far away. I look forward to continuing doing great work with you, and thank you again.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Love it. Oh, I love it.
Please come forward.
If you come forward, yep, yep.
No heels.
Sounds gorgeous. Yep, there we go. And 1, 2, and 3, and 1 more, and 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I should.
Just read it and share it.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
You're not kidding.
It was so good.
Chip. Good. Good to see you.
Yeah, missed you last night. Right. Well, as we bid farewell to Ms. Lucas, we have the opportunity to welcome some new members of the team, particularly our 3 new advisors. Dr. Brent Williams, the superintendent advisor, the 2021 principal of the year, Dr. Elena Ashburn, and the 2021 teacher of the year, Miss Eugenia Floyd. At this time, I'd like to give each of them an opportunity to make a few remarks, and just know that we not only welcome you, we so value your experience and opinions and thoughts, and whatever you're thinking, we need to hear. So thank you for jumping right in from day one and for your service to our students. So starting with Ms. Floyd, Ms. Floyd.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Sure.
First day. I first want to just say thank you all so much for welcoming me here with such open arms. I've truly felt completely encouraged to do this great work that we do for children. And I'm really honored to just be one of so many dynamic educators in North Carolina to represent this profession at this table. So thank you all so much for allowing me to be here. And I look forward to adding any and all input that I can to support the work that is going to happen within the classroom. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Ashburn?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, Treasurer Falwell, and members of the board. It is wonderful to be at this table and to serve as an advisor to the state board as the 2021 North Carolina Wells Fargo Principal of the Year. Although it's only been 2 months, Eugenia and I have dived right into this incredible opportunity to represent our state's teachers and principals of the year alongside Maureen and Keisha. In addition to what Eugenia already mentioned, I'd like to take this opportunity briefly to share some highlights of the past 2 months. In June, the past 3 principals and teachers of the years published a position piece in Ed&C on public school employee compensation in light of our state's budget surplus. Specifically, we called for 3 changes to employee compensation. 1, to raise all beginning teacher salaries in our state to a starting salary of $40,000 per year. 2, to raise teacher compensation by 7% at each salary step. And 3, most important to me, to raise the minimum wage of classified staff to a living wage of $15 per hour. Throughout June and July, I and several other North Carolina teachers and principals of the year began advocating around that pay proposal, specifically providing public comment at the House of Education Appropriations Committee and meeting with legislators. We're grateful to both Representatives Dean Arp and Cynthia Ball, who took time out of their busy schedules to meet with us personally and hear our proposals. Eugenia and I have also engaged in several meetings, including meeting with our state superintendent, Catherine Truitt, to align our goals and support her work as she supports us. And we've likewise spoken with and engaged in many presentations, including the NC Bold Educator Conference and the North Carolina Beginning Teacher Conference, just to name a few. Lastly, Eugenia and I have set an ambitious but important goal of visiting all 115 public school units over the course of the next 11 months. We've reached out to every superintendent to schedule visits, and we're excited to report that we have nearly 40 already scheduled on the books. We're excited to meet educators across the state and hear their hopes and dreams for our state's children. Thank you for this opportunity to sit at the table. I look forward to our work over the course of the next 2 years.
Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Good morning to all. I am the proud superintendent of Lenoir County Public Schools, starting my 29th year in education, 27 of those in Lenoir County, and I'm honored to be here today and to be in this role. I was very impressed yesterday, and as my colleagues have mentioned, thank you for that warm welcome. My most important role is a parent of 2 public school students, Abigail in elementary school and Austin, a high school student. And I bring a lot of perspectives to, as my colleagues do and all of you do, bring a lot of perspectives to the role and to my service every day. And I'm hoping that my serving in this capacity will add to the conversations and help enrich our work moving forward. I do want to thank you for the opportunity to sit among you as we join together and put our hands to this important work to the benefit of the students, the staff members, the parents, and the larger overall communities that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. You all come forward. We'll picture.
Yeah. My goodness. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'll let you slide. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, let's have, yeah, y'all. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Keep giving me plaques and certificates. I'm running out of rank.
So it's I managed the last photo.
The whole bedroom, they're just like. Mr. Johnson? Yeah, there we go.
All's in trouble. Yeah, okay, just want to make sure I can see everybody's face.
No. Or I'm not gonna do this here. Be down, but I'm not fine.
All right, very good. Advisors, we really look forward to working with you, and thanks for jumping in. I now turn to our superintendent for the superintendent's report. Superintendent Truitt.
Okay. Or no DHS.
That's coming next. If you're, are you okay?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you. Let's do that again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So it's a pleasure to follow all of these special recognitions. Congratulations to you, Tiffany. Congratulations, Mrs. Crosby. And congratulations to our advisors. And Keisha and Maureen, we're so glad that you are able to spend the second year with us. And already the 5 of you are going to be a force to be reckoned with, and we're so excited that you're here. So welcome to you all. I am really excited this morning to share with the board some personnel additions and changes that are a further continuation of the senior leadership team at the department really creating a leadership structure that continues to put students at the center, but also allows us to support districts in perhaps ways that we've not been able to support districts before. So with that, please allow me the opportunity to share some changes with you. So we have 4 announcements, and each of the 4 folks impacted by this are going to say a few words about what they are going to be doing. So let's go to the next slide, please. Is it not cooperating with you, Dr. Townsend Smith? Oh, there we go. So we're going to start with Dr. Mary Hemphill. So Dr. Hemphill is, you heard from yesterday, she is one of our amazing leaders here at the department who is largely responsible for putting together our computer science standards statewide. So I am really pleased to say that Dr. Hemphill will now be the Director of Academic Standards for the department. And I am going to ask that she share a couple of words with you all virtually about the work that she's going to be leading.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Truitt, Chairman Davis, members of the board, and those assembled. I am honored to be able to serve in the new capacity as Director of Academic Standards. Truly, when we think about a people-first approach, one of the reasons that I got into education is because I had amazing, passionate expertise in the field when it came to my K-12 journey, and I was able to pour back into our students. And so this work is about our big people helping little people. And in the Academic Standards Department, we have some of the most passionate or authentic individuals who are truly working to make sure that across the content areas, our educators and our stakeholders have everything that they need to make sure that students have the quality teaching and learning. So I am so honored to be able to support and lead alongside this team. It truly also is going to mean authentic engagement. We know that the educational field and ecosystem are changing on a daily basis. And I think we've moved from the new normal to the now normal. So in order for us to make sure that we are serving each of the 8 regions, each of the ecosystems, and every single student in our state in an authentic way, we have to truly understand the work. We have to truly understand how that's going to look and manifest across all 116 LEAs and throughout all public schools and charter schools. And then that's going to take also strong stakeholder support from our students who sit at the desk to our district leaders and those that are making decisions to ensure that our students have access, to ensure that our students are successful, and to ensure that every adult who touches a student's life has the questions, answers, and information that they need. So again, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to serve North Carolina students and schools in this capacity. And thank you so much for the support and guidance of our amazing, wonderful team.
Well, Mary, it is an honor to have you assume this role. And I have 100% faith that you will lead your teams through the next round of academic standards review, and as well as our CTE and other content areas where we have standards review pending and imminent. And I love that I know that everyone in this room has such faith in you, that you are someone who will keep students at the center of the work and really follow through on that people first approach. So thank you so much for being willing to take on this challenge.
Thank you.
Next. We have Dr. Angie Mullinex, who is going to join Dr. Marr's team as the Director for the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration's Innovative Practices and Programs. You, of course, are already familiar with Dr. Mullenix's work. And so I am incredibly excited that really she is now moving into a role that she was originally brought to DPI to do. So I've asked Dr. Mullenix to share a little bit about her vision for this work.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Superintendent Truitt. Thank you, Chair Davis, members of the board. I'm excited to be before you again this morning and also following Dr. Mary Hemphill Joseph. As she works with the academic standards, I'll also be working collaboratively with her as we start to explore competency-based education across our state. Looking first, of course, at research and what other states have done so that we can make sure that if we transition into that we're doing it in an educated way that is very well informed. And then additionally, I'll be continuing my efforts with military connected children, serving on the MIC3 Council and as the superintendent's designee, and also with our Purple Star Award designation as we enter into our third year with applications opening on September 1st. And then I'll continue working with the promising practices. I began that work before COVID, and we sort of set that aside, which everything happens for a reason. I firmly believe that. And now we will be lifting up some of those promising practices that are aligned to the superintendent's North Star and Polaris, and then also to the Office of Learning Recovery. If you follow Dr. Marr on Twitter, you've seen some of the promising practices that are already happening across our state with summer programming. And so we want to lift those up in a way to make sure that whether you are on the East Coast or the West Coast, that we are sharing knowledge about what is happening so that others can learn from that information and grow themselves. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the opportunity.
Thanks. You know, as a military spouse, I cannot think of a better person to lead supporting military connected efforts than you. So who is also a military spouse. So thank you so much for doing that work. And I will also just add that we've all been a part of so many different conversations as we emerge out of this pandemic about what are we going to continue to do that we did before and what are we going to leave behind for good. And in these conversations in the Office of Learning Recovery are, what are we going to continue to fund and what are we going to leave behind? And so Angie will help, again, lift up those innovative practices and really work with districts to figure out what they're going to do differently and what we want to what recommendations do we want to make to the General Assembly about what's going to be funded? So I will add, if we could skip ahead, I think it's, let's see, is Dr. Korn here? She's on the line. Okay, so we'll do David last. If we could skip ahead to Dr. Korn, because she is also joining the Office of Learning Recovery as the Director of Research and Evaluation. And this is so crucial because we've not had someone dedicated to research and evaluation lately at the department. And so in an effort to continue this administration's desire to have cross-functional teams within the agency, I'm really excited that Dr. Korn is going to join DPI and develop a research and evaluation agenda through the Office of Learning Recovery that supports the agency and the board's work, as well as the legislature and districts. So Dr. Korn, would love for you to say a few words, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Superintendent. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, I just really reiterating the comments just made. I am thrilled about this opportunity. I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to work with the state board, work with DPI leadership for many, many years, work with the superintendents at the local level, and just getting this chance to help build the research and evaluation agenda for K-12 at such a critical time for our state. As you guys know, for the past couple of years have been working with My Future NC and have really used that as an opportunity to really deeply understand what college and career ready means for the state of North Carolina. And so I really feel like bringing that lens to DPI, to the leadership, will really help us be able to really know what the impact is of K-12, working collaboratively with DPI leadership, state board, and with our local school districts to understand all the innovative practices and what works best for helping our kids and our teachers inside our K-12 classrooms. So it's a real honor for me, and just can't wait to get started, and really looking forward to it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny, for those words. And we are really excited to be able to dedicate time and resources to research and evaluation here at the agency. So thank you for taking the plunge and joining DPI. Okay, let's go to David now, please.
Kickball team where I got picked last.
No, something, no. No, that honor goes to Dr. Wren. So I'm really incredibly excited today to let everyone know that Dr. Stegall will continue in his role as Deputy Superintendent, but now has also been named Chief Academic Officer. Many of you remember that the wonderful Dr. Maria Petrie Martin held the role of Chief Academic Officer at DPI. And we've not had a Chief Academic Officer since she left us for greener pastures in Virginia. And so I'm given the conversations that we've had at this board meeting regarding equity of standards, curriculum, and instruction. I think it is fitting that we put our money where our mouth is and say, we're going to prioritize the Division of Academic Standards with a leader whose title is Chief Academic Officer. So with that, Dr. Stegall, I will turn it over to you.
You said it perfectly. I thank you all for giving me a moment to say a few words, Chairman Davis and the board and Superintendent Truitt. As she just shared, the main focus of this is to better align and be deliberately aligned to what the nomenclature and the work that's happening at the district level. And most districts have a chief academic officer or assistant superintendent of instruction. So sometimes when you look on an org chart, you're not necessarily sure who to contact. So we're trying to be, and not that I will be all things academic. We have amazing people all throughout the department could do any of the work, but having that deliberate point of contact is the hope, and that feedback loop and clarity is one of the goals. Some of the things that are underway already, I'll just let you know, there's a curriculum leaders conference at NCAT, September the 15th through the 17th. We have 60 plus school districts already sent in their chief academic officer. I'll be spending 3 days with them there. We again, trying to align the work. This is as much about answering questions, being that support structure. And you see up there, I put lead with empathy, because I can't imagine what every school, their unique situation, how difficult it is in the best of circumstances. And then all this coming down and changes that are happening constantly, they need support in every level possible. So being that level of support, connecting them to one another, having that network is vital. We will continue to have a chief academic advisory. We'll have two chief academic officers from each LEA, from each region from LEAs. So there'll be 16 of those, and have 2 from the charter school division. So that will be monthly meetings we'll have with those. We did it last year as well. And again, that 360 feedback loop is what it's about. We make decisions here all the time, but informed decisions are to do that well, we have to know and hear not only from our advisors on the board, which are vital, but those are doing work in diverse districts across the state. As the superintendent shared, we also are working on things like the procedures manual to help better understand how to do the work of curriculum alignment and instructional support at the district level. So that those types of tasks that we take on that makes their jobs more aligned and easier to implement and make sure that we don't leave things to chance. That is certainly a goal of ours. We will have a curriculum leaders newsletter, which we've been having. You heard Dr. Mullenix. I'm excited about continuing to work with her around the promising practices work, highlighting what's going well. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if you can find out where they're doing something really well. And, if Lenore County's having similar issues that you do, and they've found a way to overcome those challenges, why don't we learn from Lenore County instead of trying to reinvent it by ourselves, right? Elevate those promising practices up and connect people to one another. We need to get education out of the competition game with each other. We're all the same team, right? So we need to find ways to connect each other and don't worry about who gets the credit. Let's make sure the students get the credit and get the work. So, and then a couple other things really quick. Working with the Superintendent's Advisor for Workforce, Christy Van Auken, and Department of Commerce and our CTE group around credentialing and being part of the solution for our students having something they walk out of high school with that they can walk into a job and have credentials that have value and that can open doors for them. So there's lots of on-ramps and off-ramps for students to plug in to have a career, have a life after high school that's productive, starting with a $15 an hour minimum wage is advocating for things like that as well. So I'm honored and look forward to the work ahead, look forward to implementing the board and the superintendent's vision, and appreciate all your support up to this point and going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you once again for your leadership in the agency throughout the pandemic. Thank you so much. And I'm incredibly excited that you will be that support for districts that we know they need. And as you said, every district is different. Every district has a different set of needs. And the more that we can rally around those needs and meet districts where they are, the more successful our students will be. So thank you so much. So last but certainly not least, Dr. Wren, if you could come forward, please. I am incredibly excited to announce that following the bittersweet resignation of our CIO, Michael Nicolaides, who will be recognized at next month's board meeting, that Dr. Vanessa Wren has been named Chief Information Officer for the Department of Public Instruction. I cannot tell you, Vanessa, how excited I am that you have decided to take on this challenge. You are an educator first and an IT specialist second. And I think that that lens is going to be crucial to take us where we need to go now in the arena of IT and education. And so I would love for you to share a little bit of your vision with the board today.
Thank you, Superintendent Truitt, Chairman Davis, and members of the board. I am very humbled to be in this position, but also very excited at the same time. And so as part of this role, we'll be unifying the ed tech services, technology services, and digital teaching and learning with data. And much like Dr. Stegall so eloquently said, again, it's closing that feedback loop, making clarity and where do we go where we need to get support if you're out in the field. So putting these things together. Like Superintendent Truitt said, I am an educator first. I started my career as a CTE teacher in high school. And unlike many, I was drawn to teaching basically because of the experience I had as a student, where I knew there was many gaps that I hoped that I could impact. And so many years later, I served as a CTO at a LEA for many years. So I'm really honored and truly humbled to be in this position. But my lens is truly an educator lens more than an IT lens. And so when I talk about the vision for IT and what that means, I think it's important. And I thought that our Virtual Teacher of the Year, Ms. Crosby, did such a good job describing an intersection between technology and education. And I loved it when she said it didn't matter where your zip code is, and she's exactly right. And that's what technology should be doing in education, opening doors for students and parents everywhere. So part of the vision for IT here is that we will work effectively in aligning things, but people are first. The driving force for everything in IT to be effective are student outcomes and people's needs. And those are people in the agency, and those are people in the field, but most importantly, those are our students. And I think it's so important not to lose sight of what we do in IT, particularly here at Department of Public Instruction, because it so impacts students. And sometimes you might not realize that when you're talking spreadsheets and scripts and coding, but it actually does. And so the driving force is certainly focused on people. And part of that focus on people, again, is the alignment here in the agency, where we're going to be committed to collaborative relationships and professional growth of the team members here, and also equipping everyone to use technology effectively for student engagement and participation. And I think one of the most important things that we have to do under IT services is continue advocating for all access for all students and all teachers. They have to have access at home, anytime, anywhere for connective operations. And so that'll be one of the things that we'll be doing a lot of work with partnerships and advocacy here. I was also very happy to hear Ms. Ashburn mention NC Bold. NC Bold is one of the conferences that we've been putting on the last 2 years, and that's certainly some of the work that we will continue. But some of the guiding principles, and I put them here on the screen, is we certainly have to have safety and security as a mindset. And that'll be achieved through a culture of collaboration where we train folks on how we keep student data safe, how we secure infrastructures, and then also supporting our PSUs as we secure their infrastructure. And then, of course, innovation is so important as part of technology, and that's leading with innovation, where we focus on modernizing. And Dr. Sandberg shared a little yesterday about what is modernization, right? And I think he did a really good job, but we focus on that modernization and automation as much as possible. So when we start looking for, we need data to improve our processes or need data to know how we've been effective, we can easily streamline that data and get that data as we need it. But the main purpose and the primary purpose is to connect education with all things technology to make a world-class education for the students in North Carolina. So thank you for your support. I am humbled, I am honored, and I appreciate your faith in me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wren. So this concludes my report today. I hope that you all have gotten a glimpse of the work that the senior leadership team is doing with this org chart, which is putting the best people in the roles possible, as well as people who have a mindset that they are here to serve districts, because we serve students in how we serve districts. We have to serve and support the adults who are with our students every day. And those relationships, that collaboration and that alignment are essential. So thank you for allowing me to give my report today. And I turn things back over to Chair Davis.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions or comments from my colleagues for our Superintendent? Okay, hearing none, thank you for your report and that update. We now have an opportunity to receive an update from our good partners in the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And we'll begin with Chief Deputy Secretary Gail Perry. Chief Deputy.
Well, good morning, Chairman Davis, and good morning, everyone. It's always good to be once again with our education partners. We're going to do two things today. One is give you an update on our current statewide trends and a little bit more information about the Delta variant and what we're seeing there. And then I will talk through the most recent revisions to the toolkit. Dr. Tilson, who is usually with me, is on some much deserved leave. And so I have with me my good colleague, Dr. Susan Consagra, who will start with an overview of our current trends. Dr. Consagra?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Perry. And as already mentioned, I'm going to go through some of the recent data trends we're seeing in North Carolina. And as you all know, we have been tracking a number of metrics since the beginning of the pandemic. So let me start off with that. And so if we flip to the next slide, you'll see let's keep going one more. We'll see here a graph of the number of cases that we are seeing in North Carolina week over week. And so this really looks at from the very beginning of the pandemic, what we are seeing on cases. And as you can see on the very right-hand side of that graph, you can see we are starting to experience another pretty sharp increase in the number of cases that we're seeing it. And that increase is steeper, as you can see, than what we have seen previously. So we are seeing a rapid increase. We are on that exponential curve of cases beginning to increase. And we are at the point now of where we were, in the fall of last year already. And that has happened over just a few week time frame. Another metric we look at is also the percentage of tests that are coming back positive. So, we have many testing centers across the state where anyone can get tested if they are having symptoms or for screening. And that number of tests that are coming back has also increased pretty rapidly. So this graph goes, as you can see, to the beginning of July. So just over a month, and we can see there that tests coming back positive are now about 10.6%, and that is double than where we were in early July. So we're seeing a lot more tests starting to come back positive, and that's continuing to increase. And then another metric we look at is percentage of people hospitalized. And so this is one of those metrics that's a lagging metric. Oftentimes we don't see this right away because it takes some time for COVID-19 to manifest and then for people to develop illness severe enough to become hospitalized. But here again, we are seeing hospitalizations go up, and they have doubled since the beginning of July. And so we're watching this very closely as well as we work with our hospital partners. And then lastly, the last metric here that I will show you is around COVID-like illness coming into our emergency rooms. And so this is something we track to get a sense, an early sense of what is coming into emergency departments, what people are reporting with. This isn't always COVID, it can be other things as well, but we look for that COVID-like illness, fever, shortness of breath, other symptoms. And you can see there the number of emergency department visits, which is in the red line, which is for this year, is starting to increase as compared to the light gray line, which was last year's number at this time. And so you can see there that we are again pretty sharply increasing over the last several weeks. And we are, and this is already, about a week, we update this, periodically, but you can see we're pretty close to being higher than we were at this point last year. And so we're going to surpass those numbers pretty soon. Next slide. So, all in all, this is telling us, of course, all four of these metrics are moving in the wrong direction. And we know, I know all of you have been seeing this in, as we look at the communities and look at what's happening in the news around us. And the reason we're seeing this is because of the Delta variant. And so, if we look at the number of COVID-19 cases, if we look at the prevalence of Delta variant, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is and what we know about it, the proportion of cases that we are seeing that are due to the Delta variant has increased. And so this shows for the entire US, those columns look at, over a few weeks' time, what proportion were attributable to Delta. And you can see that darker orange color, 617.2 is the Delta strain, and that is pretty much the predominant strain in the United States right now. And this is the same version of that graph looking at North Carolina, and we are seeing that same trend here. This, goes back further through December. You can see the various strains of the coronavirus that we have seen in North Carolina, and more recently in the last several weeks, the Delta variant strain has become the most predominant strain that we are seeing when we sequence tests. So what do we know about the Delta variant? Well, one we know is much more transmissible than previous strains of the coronavirus. On average, prior, there was estimates that each person would infect, up to two people. Here with this strain, we're seeing it much higher, up to 6 people being infected, if they're unvaccinated. And so it is much more transmissible. And there also is preliminary evidence to show that it may also lead to more severe disease. And we also may see more hospitalizations as a result of that. Vaccine is still effective in preventing infection and especially severe disease, including hospitalization and death. And that is a really great news. That is our, #1 priority. And that's important, even among even though children under 12 at this point can't be vaccinated, we know increasing vaccinations in our community will protect them as well. And so that is the good news there, that we know we have a tool that is effective. And then, recently there's been some new data that's come out that shows that, in the uncommon event that a post-vaccination case occurs, an individual may be able to transmit the infection, even if they're vaccinated, as well as an unvaccinated individual. And so, again, that's very uncommon. We are seeing most of the cases in North Carolina, the overwhelming majority are happening in unvaccinated individuals. But if there is a post-vaccine infection, they are able to transmit disease. And that's really why over the last few weeks, we've had a change in our CDC guidance recommending everyone, regardless of their vaccine status, wear a mask indoors in counties with substantial to high community spread. And if you look at the map of where we are as a country, and particularly in North Carolina, you will see that the majority of our counties are in that range of high to substantial spread. And so that means we are seeing over higher amount. And over the last several weeks, we've had a few counties in yellow that have changed now to orange and red. And I suspect that those remaining counties will be turning orange and red pretty soon as well, given where our case rates are going. And so pretty much our entire state falls in this category of high or substantial community transmission. So I will pause there and I will turn it over to Deputy Secretary Perry to talk a little bit more about the toolkit, and then I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Consagra. And so given all of what you just heard, what does that mean for our Strong Schools Toolkit changes? I want to walk through at a high level the changes that you've seen since the last version of the toolkit when we were together discussing it. So if we could just move to the next slide. Obviously, one of the key changes is the shift in the language to really clarify the strategies that should be implemented by all schools. And these are the strategies that we really think are critical for schools to prioritize. We've tried to narrow down the total number of protocols that are in the toolkit to really focus on those protocols that we know are the most effective at slowing the spread of COVID-19. There are also additional strategies that school leaders could consider adopting. These strategies will just provide that additional layer of prevention to further reduce the risk of COVID-19, but I'm going to focus most of my comments today on those strategies that should be implemented by all schools. So I think, the upshot here is that we have added significant amount of information on offering and promoting COVID-19 vaccination and testing strategies. We've had several conversations together about the efficacy of surveillance testing and also symptom testing on site, and there's more work being done there, but also the real importance, as Dr. Consagra stressed, on promoting COVID-19 vaccination as our single best tool to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and turn these trends that we all want to see going in the right direction. And most importantly, get kids in person, full day, full-time instruction, which is, I know, our shared goal. And I would just add again on the promoting of vaccination that at this point, the most important and critical messengers are the people who live in communities, who can talk about your experience getting vaccines, can talk to family and friends. People want to hear from folks that they know and they trust. And so I encourage you to continue to do the work promoting COVID-19 vaccination. We did add language on the importance of offering in-person learning, and by that we mean full-time, full-day in-person learning for all students all year long. And so as a result of wanting to have kids in school as much as possible, we did add the statement that all schools should require all children and staff K through 12 to wear masks regardless of vaccination status. And I think Dr. Consagra just spoke to it, but I just want to pause there for a minute and talk again about why it's so important that we do have mask wearing in schools. What we know is that the more concentrated, susceptible people are, the easier it is for this virus to find its next victim. And of course, all of you are very well aware that children under 12 are not able to currently get vaccines. We also know that the vaccination rate amongst our 12 to 18-year-olds is quite low in the state, at hovering in the 26% range. So in addition to really wanting to see more people who are eligible to get vaccines, it's going to be important if we really want kids to have undisrupted in-person learning for students and staff to mask in schools, given how many of our students are either unable to get vaccines or are not yet vaccinated. We did remove some requirements, including the conducting of daily symptom screening. That was not found to be one of the more effective strategies. And by that, I'm talking about the temperature check and the questionnaire that was done daily, which is different from the screening testing. And we did remove the requirement to provide remote learning options for students unable to be at school due to illness or exposure. And we know different districts are handling remote learning in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. I did want to pause for a moment on one of the important changes that have been made. And again, I want to just stress that all of our recommendations align to the recommendations made by the CDC and the American Academy for Pediatrics. There is some new language that is about modified quarantine guidance for students after a close contact in which both people are wearing masks. So students do not need to quarantine if they are exposed as a close contact in K-12 settings if both students are engaged in consistent and correct use of masks at the time of exposure, and there are those other prevention strategies in place. And this is a really important change and a big deal for schools that want to keep kids in-person learning and not have them having to quarantine due to exposure. So again, but what the critical component here is that mask wearing for students. And I do want to be clear that this exception does not apply to teachers and staff or other adults in the indoor classroom setting, because we don't have data about the efficacy of that right now. But that is a significant shift in our quarantine protocol. Again, it is dependent upon masking. And I know there's been some confusion about quarantining and isolating. And I do want to just be clear that under state law, it is local health directors and the state health director that have the authority to give control measures, including issuing isolation and quarantine orders in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19 or really any communicable disease posing a significant threat to the public health. So this is the new quarantine protocol that is in place, assuming that there is the mask wearing between students. Next slide. That was really a highlight of all the key changes to the toolkit. I think Dr. Consagra and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, Chief Deputy and Dr. Consagra. I'll remind my colleagues that in our voting items today, the board, as been its custom throughout the pandemic, will consider adopting the revised Strong Schools Toolkit as presented. Any questions, my colleagues, for our DHHS partners? Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and greetings to you all. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions. I'll start with the first. Would you mind explaining to me sort of the logic or the calculus behind and the key changes saying that all schools should versus shall require all children and staff in schools to wear masks? Could you explain the logic between should and shall there?
I'm happy to, and thank you for the question. So that was a shift in the toolkit. The prior language used the word require. In this version of the toolkit, we are telling school leaders that they should require the protocols that are in the toolkit. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is that I think we all know now what the right protocols are that need to be put in place to keep children in-person learning and as safe as possible from COVID-19. So our expectation is that school leaders will make the right decisions and follow the protocols in the toolkit. We also are in a very different place than we were months before now. We have this incredibly new, powerful tool. It is vaccination. We do need to see rates of vaccination rise in communities because, again, the more pockets we see with large groups of unvaccinated individuals who are eligible for vaccines, the more we're going to see that spread. So I think we see a difference now in both what we know works and what we know is effective. And we have this new powerful tool of vaccines. And so we're giving school leaders the opportunity to make the right choices in their communities.
Thank you for that. And I don't disagree that I think we know better. I've yet to see the translating to doing better. And so our knowledge versus our actions, I think there's a disparity there that removing that requirement is a little bit concerning to me. I guess the second question is, it relates to the fact that you mentioned the vaccinations and they're powerful, but specifically children under 12 don't yet qualify for vaccinations. And so they'd be disproportionately at risk, especially without the requirement of a mask mandate. And so I'm wondering, what are the potential disadvantages of students wearing masks all day? Are there any academic or health disadvantages? And by comparison to perhaps district or school leaders choosing not to enforce masks. So what are the pros and cons, I guess, of wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask for children?
I'm happy to step in there to answer that question again, Dr. Susan Consagra. So one, there's been a whole host of studies on masks, both in scientific settings as well as real world settings. And we know, the advantages of masks include a reduction in, for example, the number of droplets that spread infectious material. That's how masks work. We know viruses spread on small, fine respiratory droplets, and the masks are effective in preventing those droplets from spreading. And there's been a number of studies that look at, in the real world, how does that translate into reducing infection? So I'll just give you an example of a few of them, but I'd encourage, anybody who wants to look at more data on this to look at some of the CDC information online. They have a science brief on masks, but just to give you an example, for example, they looked at families where there was one infected member of a family, and they looked at those families that consistently wore masks and those that didn't. And they saw a 79% reduction in the transmission of infection in those cases. In another study of about 1,000 people, where they were doing contact tracing, because those 1,000 people had been exposed to another individual that did have COVID-19, they also saw about a 70% reduction among those that said they consistently always wore a mask versus those that didn't. I can go through many studies, but there's many of those done, in many countries around the world now that show similar evidence. And then conversely, they've also looked at the impact of masks on oxygen, carbon dioxide during rest and during physical activity. They've looked at that among adults and children, and they have not seen any harm in any of those things or any changes in any of those things. And so from a clinical perspective, really, really effective in reducing transmission of virus with, no impact on your respiration.
So I'm sorry, just as one last follow, any academic disadvantages at all to wearing masks that you're aware of?
Yeah, so on the academic disadvantages, I will say, our biggest focus right now is keeping kids in school. And a big disadvantage to children would be to not be in school. And so masks increase the ability for children to be in school. And that is because, as you've seen from the data I've shown you and some of the things, the more children there are that are either infected by COVID-19 or exposing others that are not wearing, there will be more children out of school. And so not wearing a mask poses a disadvantage.
Vice Chair Duncan.
A couple of education leaders have asked this question, and so I'm going to pass it along to see if you can provide some thought on it. A large number of educators got vaccinated back in the March timeframe, which will be about 6 months by the time school is up and going, early September, roughly 6 months. There had been some conversation periodically, even for those vaccinated, whether or not at some point a booster might be an appropriate thing. Is there any time frame or more updated research or thought about whether or not a booster would be necessary, and if so, what the timeframes for that would look like?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So at this point, we don't have further data on when a booster or a third dose would be, if they would be needed and when that would occur. That's something we know that the CDC and FDA is very closely looking at. What we do know right now is that of those individuals that are vaccinated, again, we are seeing the majority of cases among unvaccinated individuals. And so that indicates to us that those individuals that have been vaccinated have, still a high degree of protection from the vaccine. Now there are some individuals that are immunocompromised, may, for other reasons, have not developed an adequate immune response. That is another group of individuals that we know the FDA and CDC are looking at, but that represents a really small percentage of people in the U.S.
Other questions from my colleagues? Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon. This is Keisha Clemens. So I feel like I would be remiss not to just say this, and there was a statement that was made that just brought up, some emotion and some concerns that I'm having personally, in being in the field. And I just feel like I need to be able to share this. One of the things that was shared was about the piece about the mask and how, we can avoid some quarantining if both children adequately are wearing the mask together. And I think about on my first day of school, and one of the promises that I make to my children and to my parents is that a commitment to their safety and a commitment to their learning. And it is very difficult for me to figure out how to follow through with that promise for safety when across the state we have various situations we're going into when there is optional masking. There are teachers, adult staff that are not vaccinated. And I am, as a principal in the field, unsure of how can I make on that promise to my children about safety. And I think we're all committed to making sure that students are in-person learning. We've been committed to that. However, some of the decisions that are being made across the state are not allowing for that or putting us in a position where that's not going to happen. And so I say all this to just share my concerns. I don't know what will come of that, but that is something that I'm grappling with as a principal right now, about to start school in a couple weeks. And I want to make good on my promise to kids to make sure that they are safe and to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can. And I do feel like that there are decisions being made for me not to be able to do that. And so any advice, suggestions for all the principals and teachers out there that want to be committed to keeping our students safe, I'm all ears.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also was not going to say anything, but as Keisha just mentioned, my heart's leading me to do so. Maybe there are others on the school board who were fighting for their life with COVID other than me, but I can tell you how intense and how serious and dangerous it is. What I would pray for right now for this board is that we do not lose our ability to challenge assumptions. There are so many things going on in our state right now from all different aspects. Some of them have to do with how people felt about vaccines 50 years ago. And, we're dealing with some of that. And obviously we're dealing with a situation where, people are getting information that may not be completely accurate. And that poses a problem for trying to run Department of Public Instruction as an employer of people or run it operationally. So that's all leading me, Mr. Chair and members of the board, to tell you that we have to keep challenging assumptions about what all this means. In the Wall Street Journal today, there's a long expose about the fact that we don't even really know who's been vaccinated. And I would say that's pretty much accurate in North Carolina. We really don't know who's been vaccinated. And we really don't know who have the antibodies. I have one of the highest antibody counts, and even at 15 months after being in intensive care, but I've also been vaccinated, and that antibody count was before I got vaccinated. So, or how long this lasts, or booster shots, or whatever. I'm just praying for this board, as serious as it is, to have a safe, healthy work environment and to get kids back into classrooms. I just pray that we'll all come to these meetings, which I've observed us doing, and being willing to take in new information or look at something differently regarding information that's already between our ears. And I think that's the only small chance we have to get to the right balance and the right outcome. And so it wasn't really a question, it's more of a editorial statement, but I've seen COVID in color, and I know the impact it's having on illiteracy and poverty in this state in terms of as a state treasurer. And I appreciate the board members listening to this, and pray that we can all continue just to challenge assumptions. And I only say that because when I was battling for my life in intensive care, I went back and looked at some of the headlines during that week, and all we all heard about in the second and third week of March is we don't have enough ventilators. And then 6 weeks later, what we heard is we have too many ventilators. And then 10 weeks after I was in intensive care, we're exporting ventilators. 5 months after I was in intensive care, maybe ventilation wasn't the right thing. And I'm not critical of anyone. I fought from being ventilated. But I'm just saying that challenging assumptions during that whole process is and remains so important. And I appreciate Mr. Chairman and the board listening to what I had to say.
Thank you, Treasurer. Other comments, questions? Hearing none, I want to thank our partners in DHHS again for this report. What I get from this report is we are entering a new phase in this battle that's potentially more threatening than the phase we've survived thus far. And that while we all value our own individual choices in this battle, our individual choices affect each other. And what this information tells me is our best tool to protecting ourselves and each other, particularly our students, is to get vaccinated. And where appropriate, wear masks. So I respect everyone's individual choice, but our individual choices affect each other. And I think it's mindful in Ms. Clemens' comments and the treasurer's to keep those forefront as we move forward. Thank you, Chief Deputy Gail Perry and Dr.
Thank you, sir.
Cassandra. All right. We are slightly ahead of schedule, and so we'll proceed to our committee reports. And I remind committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent and any item requiring action will be done at the end of the agenda via roll call. We'll begin with our Business Operations Committee report, and I'll turn to the chair of that committee, Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. For a review of the committee work, and I first thank our Vice Chair Todd Chastain of the committee. School business modernization was a matter of new business. We had a quarterly update. We'll continue to have those on a quarterly basis. Dr. Mark Sandberg went through a review in 4 different areas as we move forward. One of the new ones that was introduced was the grant application software, which I think is going to be very important long term, and it also represents a significant contract on our contracts over $500,000. But will be a more efficient process, and ultimately we hope will be a more economic process in that we will only pay for what we're actually using under that contract. The other areas of work continue to be challenging. We have systems, as was identified during the course of the presentation, that are 35 to 40 years old in all too many places around the state, including in this building. And so we have a lot of work to do to catch up on that. Our cybersecurity issues, again, are important to us as well. So we move forward on all those areas. And I think we'll get a more definite report once we know what the funding clearly looks like out of the budget. And we will have our experts back once we know what the funding picture is to know more about where we'll be headed immediately. Our second new business item is, again, a regular report, and it's on the American Rescue Plan ARP update. And this particularly was focused on ESSER 3 funds. Dr. Michael Maher gave us a review of what our application processes look like after the template had been approved a while ago. The application process has received some feedback from the Department of Education. The department then moved to review and resolve the feedback on several of the items. There's still a couple of items of which there's feedback. And then we're in the interesting position, not alone, there's some other places, but we're pretty unique in this regard of not yet knowing what our legislature is going to do in terms of the issuance of the funds. And so once we see where we are with that, then the work can be finalized. At this point, as Dr. Maher has informed us, there are several items that correspond with what the department recommends as the best practices for use of the funds. But there's several items in the proposed legislative that would vary from that in significant ways. And so where the legislation comes out, and that's a work in process, isn't going to be important. Obviously, the department and this board have set out where we think the emphasis should be and where the points should be that should be covered. Dr. Maher has talked to us about those previously, and he and his staff have worked very hard on those. So where that ends up as we go forward will be important to then finalizing further submissions of plans. I mean, the one thing we probably know for certain is we will need further amendments as we go forward, which is why this will remain a monthly item. Also, I think there was a general board request that next month, part of Dr. Mahar's report to us will include what happened during the summer school programs this summer, so we can build the data from that to try to take a look at how we continue that type of learning as we go forward and what we deem best practices and areas where we can truly help our children. We then have a number of matters for action. We have on action of first reading, our BizOp 1 was the approval of contracts over $500,000. And we've already touched on that. The second item had to do with bus contracts, which is an interesting program that I must confess I hadn't focused on much before. We sell used buses over a period of time, and there's a fund that then is there. And what's being done with the fund, I think, is a very wise thing, which is to take our oldest buses that are more years and more miles than is recommended, wherever they might be, whatever county they might be in, and we replace those buses with the funds that are generated by the sale of the surplus property. And so we got a report on how 9 buses that are badly needed in 9 different areas around the state are going to be put to use. And although not the biggest item on our budget, I think it's important. And for those counties, I expect it is a pretty big item to have that bus replaced. BizOp 2 is our 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. We had a total of $21 million approximately distributed under these grants. There were, I'm going off the top of my head, I apologize for that. I believe there were 63 grants in total that were recommended. Dr. Latricia Townsend did an excellent job of explaining the selection process, the scoring, and how grants are being distributed in a way to try to make sure all areas of the state are included as part of the grant process. BizOp 3 was our ESSER 2 leadership funds request for Governor's School. Ms. Alexis Schaus presented that. These are funds that come from ESSER 2 funds or additional money that has not been used out of ESSER 2 that's available for these designations. And this is an appropriate use under the COVID-19 restrictions and a needed use, and an opportunity for us to again thank our partners, High Point University and Meredith College, our partners in the Governor's School program. all accounts, it again was an excellent experience this summer and an important experience for many of our students. BizOp 4 American Rescue Plan, back to ESSER 3, now the ARP IDEA grant programs. John Kiefer gave us a very good presentation on an immensely dense subject, and I appreciate how he cut through it for us to help explain how this program is handled, how the funds are allotted to our different accounts, and how we need to go about the accounting process. All of us remembering there's a significant, as there should be, federal audit process for the funding that's going on with these various grants that have been made by the federal government. Desperately needed grants for our educational institutions. BizUp 5 was a presentation by Dr. Townsend Smith, which now we transfer back to ESSER 2 for those keeping score, to reuse some of those unallotted ESSER 2 funds, as we described before, to support strategic priorities and efforts that relate to COVID-19, and specifically for the development of a data base and dashboard, and that can be used with respect to COVID-19 recovery and can be helpful with respect to Leandro reporting to the court, which the board is required to do as well. So those are important pieces of work. Those are the primary parts of it. And there are others, including some training and some research support, all of which will be in collaboration with the department as we move forward. BizOp 6 was again presented by Dr. Townsend Smith. This involved approximately $245,000 of additional funding that we had available from funding that had been earlier obtained over a period of time in order to support our schools and support in situations in which there are immediate needs. This is money that will go, and the board had suggested that we could authorize this some time ago, but will go to support the North Carolina Education Corps funding request that's been made by their Board of Advisors to our board. BizOp 7 was presented again by Ms. Schaus, which was the policy amendment PRC 169, which is the CARES Act GEAR Act. This is the specialized instructional support personnel for COVID-19 response. And as we know, there's a significant amount of social and emotional welfare issues for our students. The intent of this policy amendment is to move forward with the efforts about how it would be utilized under PRC 169 to best benefit our students, and again, meets the criteria. For discussion, those were all action items. For discussion, we had BizOp 8, where Kevin Harrison did a very good job of explaining the equalization process and equivalency process for school bus routes, given that there are some other entities that have become interested in potentially being part of this utilization of this tool or preparation of this tool. And some of those entities may have additional products if a district is interested in it. So the effort is to find a way in the policy that's been presented to us for discussion, which we'll vote on next time, has to do with how we get to a place where we can approve a policy that would allow decisions to be made as to whether or not the product proposed meets all the requirements that are necessary for reporting both to the district and to the state. We have one consent item, which would be BizOp 9, which has to do with the easement at the school for the deaf in Morganton. We will follow up. This I don't think is relevant to passing the acceptance of the approximately $63,000 for the easement. But we'll follow up on board request as to whether that can be used for other capital needs at the school in terms of once that money is received, and that we'll have that information to board members. We have executed contracts report. We had a planned contracts report. Then we had an update on agency vacancies. Mr. Ryan Paxton gave us a helpful report with some graphs that showed where we are in terms of both new positions and how hiring is going forward and at each stage of the hiring process. that I think the board has appreciated having that kind of more detailed information about the vacancy reports. It's been very good to have. And finally, Ms. Alexis Schaus gave us her second of her mini budget presentations. This one focused on the budget year end and the always interesting topic, if you will, of reversions and how that works and what it should look like and where we are with respect to the reversion process. So I thank all for the work that was done for the BizOp report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. We'll now move to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee report, and the chair of that committee, Ms. Amy White. Ms. White.
Good morning, Chair Davis, fellow board members. I'm Amy White. I'm the chair of Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee, and along with my vice chair, Ms. Jill Kamnitz, we have 3 items for your consideration today. Yesterday, at the beginning of our committee, I shared with the board that the EICS 1 and EICS 2, the recommendations from an appeal panel would be shared with the board in closed session. So first, let me review EICS 1. This was an appeal from CE Academy. On Monday, August the 2nd, a 3-body appeal panel for the State Board of Education met to discuss the revocation decision of CE Academy. And during that appeal discussion, information was presented from staff of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and representatives of CE Academy. CE is an applicant charter school seeking to open a charter school serving grades K-8 in Wake County. CE's charter school application was recommended for approval at its June 7th, 2019 meeting. CE was granted a charter agreement for a 5-year term with the following stipulation: contingent upon the successful completion of the planning year. The charter for CE Academy was granted for 5 years, effective July 1st, 2020 through June 20th, 2025. CE appeared before the Charter School Advisory Board at its June 7th, 2021 meeting, and at that time, it was seeking ready to open status. The CSAB voted unanimously to not allow CE to move forward as ready to open for students for several reasons. CE was notified when the State Board affirmed CSAB's recommendation, and the State Board also voted at its July meeting not to move CE Academy forward to ready to open. As a result, CE used its right to appeal, and on August the 2nd, 2021, a 3-panel member heard that appeal. Yesterday, during closed session, the findings of that appeal were shared with the full board, and the board affirmed the panel's decision not to approve CE Academy's appeal. Therefore, the recommendation today for CE Academy is that the charter will be revoked, and we ask that you affirm that decision during voting. Elaine Riddick was the second school that the appeal panel heard on August the 2nd, 2021. Just as a history, Elaine Riddick Charter School is an applicant charter school seeking to open a charter serving in grades K-7 in Perquimans County. Elaine Riddick was recommended for approval by the State Board also in June 7th of 2019. Elaine Riddick appeared before the Charter School Advisory Board at its June 7th, 2021 meeting for a final recommendation of ready to open. And at that time, the Charter School Advisory Board unanimously voted for Elaine Riddick not to move forward for opening this fall. The State Board at its July 2021 meeting voted to affirm that recommendation for CSAB and voted to revoke that charter. Elaine Riddick exercised its right for an appeal, and that appeal was also heard earlier this week on August the 2nd. Yesterday, during the closed session, the findings of fact, both of which have been shared and are posted on eBoard for your review, were reviewed by the full board, and the full board affirmed the panel's decision not to move forward with ready to open. Therefore, Elaine Riddick's charter would also be revoked by this decision. So for EICS 1 and EICS 2 today, for CE Academy and Elaine Riddick, The EICS committee respectfully asked that the board affirm the panel's decision for revocation of the charters for those two schools. Finally, we had a discussion item, and this was the NC Access annual report, and it was exciting to hear from 3 schools in our state who have exercised the use of federal funds to further offer excellent educational opportunities for educationally disadvantaged students in our state. Data coming out of that and the creation of cohorts for leadership opportunities for leaders at charter schools seeking to offer quality educational opportunities for a more diverse student population is exciting. And we look forward to further data that will show that this is indeed a great use of federal funds. Mr. Chair, that completes our report. That report also is available on eBoard for the public to review. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. White. We'll now turn to the Healthy Responsible Students Committee report chaired by Mr. Reginald Keenan. Mr. Keenan.
Thank you. I'm Reginald Keenan, the chairman of RS committee, along with my, as I always say, my good friend, Ms. Alan Duncan. Only yesterday, Dr. Essick gives an update on the whole child. And as she said from the very beginning, healthy children learn better. And I can think of no better work than being done by Dr. Essick as to the whole child model. Briefly, she covered the what drives them to work, what drives the work that they do. And very quickly, some of the things she said was the dropout data, school health profiles, youth risk behavior survey, absenteeism data, and there's others that gives them information as to push their work. On the update, she's basically talked about 2 areas. She talked about the youth risk behavior survey, she talked about the Title V funding, she talked about the whole child pilots, which we have 11 of those, and also talked about the whole child NC advisory committee. And of course, the youth risk behavior survey is very has a lot of information. It allows you to hear from what the students are saying. As she says, is the voice of the children. And that survey is done every 2 years, starting I think in 1993. And that survey helps you assess the behaviors in the children that impact their health, not now, but also in the future. It gives you good feedback as to what the students are going through. In the, I call it YRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Of course, it's voluntary. The parental consent is required, completely anonymous, randomly selected, and it only applies to the middle and high school levels. And again, I said it began in 1993, and every odd year is done. In that survey, you're able to find behaviors that contribute to the leading cause of mortality and morbidity, such as unintentional injuries and violence, sexual behaviors, alcohol and drug use, tobacco use, unhealthy dietary behavior, inadequate physical activity, obesity, and other priority health issues. And there are 11 pilot programs we have. We also have oversample districts she talked about. And of course, we wish we could do it for the whole state, but we cannot oversample the whole state. So based on what she said, we have oversample for, at least for the district that each board member has. And also, she mentioned the fact that for 2021, we already have a vendor selected. There's 722 schools selected. There's samples drawn, the classes have been selected. There's packets, permission slip, login information. Survey of the administration to be completed by December 2021. And we still start on that around September of 2021. She gave some data snapshots, but I will not go through all of that. And then we move on to the whole child NC advisory committee. She said that they're going to get back together and become more active. And that definitely is a good thing that we truly ask that be done. And also, we talk about the Title V, the federal funds. At present, she was able to get a grant for $2,388,925. With that money, she was able to approximately affect 16 LEAs funded. There's 2 new positions funded. professional development and training for educators being that, and SISP meeting also comes under that particular money being used. So, Mr. Chair, that's a quick summary of what Dr. Esser talked about. I would like to ask Dr. Esser to remember that we as a board understand the importance of the whole child model, that we strongly support the whole child model, that we like to have quarterly updates, Mr. Chair, if we could be brief, but every quarter we'd like some update on the whole child model. And then also lastly, Mr. Chair, we ask that Dr. Esser and others continue to seek and retain funding for Title V efforts. And thank you very much. That concludes the RS committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. The record reflect Mr. Keenan's last few comments of those requests of staff. We now move to the Educator Standards and Practice Committee, chaired by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, Chair of the Educator Standards and Practice Committee. And joining me in that responsibility, the leadership of the committee, is Ms. Amy White. Yesterday, we heard information pertaining to 3 items. The first item was an item that was dealt with in closed session, ES&P 1. This is a recommendation coming forward from the Extenuating Circumstances Committee. I presented the details around 5 appeals from educators wishing to have an extension of 1 year to complete their requirements. These are lateral entry teachers, and they are completing their requirements for the CPL, the continuing professional license. 2 of those educators were recommended for approval, and I am asking that the state board later this morning approve the appeals of 2 educators, and that information is outlined in your information. That this opportunity is provided in policy LINC 021, so that particular policy makes it available to educators, lateral entry teachers who need that additional year. And those reasons pertain to personal illnesses, extreme extenuating circumstances affecting family members, and anything that falls within those categories. And so we have a committee of 4 individuals who meet periodically to hear those appeals that are prepared for us by the licensure staff. ES&P 2, this is an item pertaining to a revision in policy around the Braille list, and this information was presented to us, a discussion item, I might add, and this was presented by Ms. Sherry Vernelson along with Ms. Sherry Thomas. And some revisions in terms of the program evaluation job description. And it perked up as an important item as a result of an LEA calling the department, needing some updated information, some guidance around the job description for Braillists. Now, the State Board of Education does have authority to design or to develop the job descriptions for some non-certified personnel. And when I say some non-certified personnel, a Braillist fits that category. So this alignment was important for a couple of reasons. Number one, or the revision, I should say, was important for one primary reason, because it brought the job description in alignment with other programs, other laws, and other regulations, mainly around exceptional children. So this item will come back to us next month for our approval. The last item, ES&P 3, was presented by Drs. Edmonds, Emery, and Tomberlin. They presented a way to strengthen elements in the RFP for the advanced teaching roles. These changes will result in better alignment with the State Board of Education strategic plan, specifically around goals 1, 2, and 3. And also these enhancements in the elements of the RFP will certainly bring us into better configuration around the Leandro plan. So we're going to take action on that. next month. Next month, the RFP will be released to the field. I think the date is September 15th. The October 15th is the deadline by which the applications need to be back in the department. And I believe in December, the state board will approve those applications for advanced teaching roles. We learned yesterday that this is no longer a pilot, the Advanced Teaching Roles Initiative, that it is now a program. And I'm hoping in the very near future, we will have a presentation by Dr. Tomperlin and others to give us a sense of how, what does it mean when we talk about an advanced teaching role? What are the categories? What are these educators doing that is creative and exciting? So again, this item will come back to us. The last two items, discussion items, will come back to us next month. So I think that covers my report for August. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. We'll now turn to the final committee report of the day, the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, chaired by Ms. Jill Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Dr. Oxendine.
Take it as a compliment.
Dr. Oxendine is the vice chair of this committee, and we work together to do this important work of the board. We had 3 items of new business this month. The first was the North Carolina Computer Science Initiative update, which was presented to us initially by Dr. Hemphill, who leads the Computer Science and Technology Education team, or did lead the Computer Science and Technology Education team. She reviewed briefly the work that is continuing to be done on the new computer science standards through the supporting documents that have been released for use in the field. And then she walked us through a little bit of the process that the department had followed in putting together a team of student leaders in the area of computer science as part of a larger effort to attract more students to that particular discipline and also a more diverse set of students to that discipline. And they were able to put together a group of 6 student leaders from across the state. We had the pleasure of hearing from 3 of them. And it was about as inspirational as we get, I think, in this room. They talked to us about the work that they did to organize the very first #IMCS student-led virtual summit, which occurred last May. It was the work of a good solid year, I believe, and they walked us through their process and how they imagined what they wanted to accomplish, how they put the process together, how they attracted other students to attend, and were so enthusiastic about all of the benefits that they felt had accrued to the attendees at the May meeting, the networking that had gone on, the education. And from that, they have been inspired to continue that work, make the summit an annual event, and they are already thinking about how they're going to do that next year, hopefully in person this time. So the poise and leadership and presentation skills that we saw in those 3 young women were just inspirational and a great way to start our meeting yesterday. Our second item of new business was the draft North Carolina Standard Course of Study Procedures Manual. Superintendent Truitt started us off, and then we heard from Dr. Stegall and Dr. Edmonds. This document had been developed over a couple of cycles within the department, but had never come before the state board for review and approval. And Superintendent Truitt was asking us to sort of give the go-ahead for the department to work to update this manual. And so we heard a little bit more about that from Dr. Stegall and Dr. Edmonds. But the hope is that this manual will provide a guide in the future for all standards development within the department and standardize that process so that we are doing that work the same for each of the disciplines, the many disciplines that appear in our standard course of study. We are We also heard some experiences and discussions that had occurred around an inequity really across the state in terms of districts' ability to take the standards that the board approves and translate that into effective instruction in every classroom. And there is a difference in districts' capability to do that work. Many of them relate directly back to fiscal resources, but as part of this work on the manual, there's also going to be an effort to address that gap. Leading right directly into the strategic plan and superintendent's Polaris work. So we're all looking forward to seeing what that is going to produce, and we will be hearing at some point in the future more about that work. Finally, we received the Educator Value Added Assessment System data update from Dr. Tomberlin. This is what we've referred to as EVOS, and I'm going to sort of walk through this because it was a fairly complex presentation, and it covered several different areas. The first was estimating student growth, because EVOS data is used to do that. And there, Dr. Tomberlin reviewed the difficulties that we will have in doing that this year, because we do have a gap year. There was no data from the 2020, make sure I've got this right, 1920 school year. So we're missing a year of data. And there also is some uncertainty in terms of, there was difficulty this beginning of this school year in some of the assessments that are required for that measure of growth. He talked about how the workarounds basically that they're using to get around that problem of the gap year, and assured us that they are going to do their best with a different methodology to provide growth information that can be used by our teachers and our schools to better address the needs of our students. The actual measures that EVOS is used for across the state include school accountability growth, teacher level growth, educator effectiveness growth, and student projections. Each of these areas are somewhat different. In terms of school accountability growth, right now there is a bill, SB 654, which would withhold student accountability group measures and not include school report cards, determination of low performing schools, or determination of principal recruitment supplements. And if that bill passes, then there will not be school accountability growth measures for this past school year. In terms of educator effectiveness growth and teacher growth, again, the gap year approach will be used, and school personnel will be notified of this, but access to teacher level reporting will be turned off as a default measure in each district, and individual PSUs will have the ability to turn that access to that data back on. In terms of student projections, which are extremely important in our classrooms around the state, again, those will be provided this year, but only for use within the classroom. And then again, in terms of bonuses, there is Senate Bill 105, which would, instead of offering bonuses as in the past, the bonus money would be used as a one-time lump sum bonus for all teachers. And so I think that is as good a summary as I can give of what's happening with our EVOS data this year. Actions on first read. Our first one was SLA 1, Voyager Sopris letters, and the board will not be able to take action on that today. We look forward to taking action on it as soon as it has finished the contracting process and comes back to us. Dr. Ryan did give us a brief summary of how this slight delay will affect the cohorts that are ready and eager to start their training in letters. And that all gets rolled back somewhat, but will begin as soon as possible. SLA 2 is the State Board of Education Policy Amendment 2021-22 Read to Achieve Implementation Guide. Also, Dr. Ryan. And if you'll just give me a moment, I'm going to pull that up so that I can. This implementation guide is statutorily required, and the purpose is to provide a reference with supporting resources in one location that is aligned to updates to Senate Bill 387. So it is aligned with all the different statutory requirements that occurred over the last year that affect the Read to Achieve program. Specific components of the guide will continue to be updated and fully developed based on the new legislative timelines and dates noted within the guide. And so the board will be receiving monthly updates as the department finishes the work on different sections of this guide. But the feeling in the department was that it was important to get as many pieces as possible out there to the field in one place to make it as useful as possible as it is being developed. So we are approving the guide in its present form, but we will be receiving updates over the next few months to different sections of that guide. And then finally, SLA 3, standard setting recommendations for reading and NC Extend 1 Science, Dr. Howard. We heard last month about the process, the very complex process that goes into this standard setting. And then yesterday, she went through that quickly, assured us that the experts and the folks who had come in to guide us through that work had certified that the process had been fair and appropriate, and then we could have faith in the recommendations that came before us. We heard the two sets of recommendations involve the academic descriptors for reading and for the NC Extend 1 Science. Those are the definitions of levels 3, 4, and 5 for reading, and levels 3 and 4 for the Extend 1 standards. And then we also received the recommendations for cut scores for each of those exams, and we will be voting to approve those today. And then we had 5 consent items. The first is SLA 4, report to the governor and General Assembly, ensure security of student records. This is a routine required report that contained no substantive changes from the previous year. And then 4 high school accreditation recommendations, all from Stokes County. SLA 5, South Stokes High School. SLA 6, Stokes Early College High School. SLA 7, West Stokes High School, and SLA 8, North Stokes High School. And that is the conclusion of the SLA report.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Colleagues, that concludes our committee reports. We do have 2 more items before we get to our action agenda. And one of those items necessitates that we consult with our attorney. So we're going to move into closed session, and when we return, we will then pick up the legislative update as well as this item of new business. Vice Chair Duncan.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A1, 3, and 6, to consult with attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, and to prevent the disclosure of information as privileged or confidential pursuant to NC General Statute Sections 115C, 319, and 321.
Motion by Vice Chair.
Treasurer Falwell seconds that motion.
Thank you, Treasurer. Dr. Townsend Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Chastain? Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell?
Yeah, I seconded it. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor?
Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
Yes, motion carries. We will move into close at 11:15. So that's give us about a 10-minute break. And if you're in the room, if you could stand by until we are offline, and we'll reconvene after closed session.